This content is being brought to you by the Bourbon Real Talk American Whiskey Aroma Kit. This is a tool that I put together to help all you whiskey aficionados out there develop your palates. You can sit down with the vials and train your senses, or you can sit down with a great dram and break that whiskey down to its components. If you have any interest of purchasing a kit of your own, head on over to bourbonrealtalk.com/shop and pick one up. Thank you for listening. Hello, Bourbon Real Talk family. Have a very interesting podcast for you today. This is my, I'm going to call you my best friend, man.
That's my best friend for sure.
For sure. This is Philip Roberson. And how long have we been hanging around each other?
At least since the year 2000.
At least since 2000. So 20 years.
Yeah.
So what Philip and I thought that we would do is, obviously there's a lot going on out there in the public with regard to black and white race relations, the Black Lives Matter movement. And he and I talk about these things, but even though Bourbon Real Talk as a podcast was originally, my original idea was to try and use the connective power of bourbon, because, you know, you get together, you drink with friends, to bring people together that were maybe from different points of view, different walks of life. And what I find is that when you get to know people's real stories, it often will create a connection point where there can be empathy and you can come to a better understanding and maybe break down some of those barriers. But unfortunately, there's been so much pressure to be at odds with one another that I've been afraid to have this type of conversation. But when you and I were talking about it, you said that one thing that you have not seen is a black man and a white man with differing opinions sit down and have an honest conversation, even disagree, and be able to get up and hug it out when they're done.
Exactly. To piggyback off what he's saying, that's the biggest thing. The biggest takeaway from this is that no matter what views or anything be expressed, is that, if anything, the main purpose of this is for understanding and also just for knowledge. You know, there's nothing wrong with agreeing to disagree. That's what it's all about, you know. But also that you have another understanding of somebody else's reality. That's what it's all about. And, you know, I've never seen in any type of setting, formal setting, that somebody have a formal conversation and then be able to do it without, you know, disrespecting somebody, disrespecting the other party, or either, you know, downplaying, or, you know, just outright, just kind of, you know, it's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess every time.
Let's start off, Philip, with you telling me what your opinion is of the Black Lives Matter movement, the actual organization.
Oh, my Lord. So, no apologies given. But my opinions of what Black Lives Matter is that it is a confusion. It's a ball of confusion. I believe when it was originally created, the intentions were pure, and it was not created as a political movement. But somehow along the lines, it became a more so political movement, and it had a lot of tampering, ill tampering with it. And then that had to do with individuals, politicians, any type of member. But the whole saying in itself, the Black Lives Matter, it just in it itself, I mean, my position, how I feel about it, is that the statement in itself, yes, means something that's relevant to me. It does have a trigger to, of course, who I am, my melanin, and everything.
For those
else.
of y'all listening at home, Philip's black.
Yeah, just in case y'all didn't know.
Just in case y'all didn't know, Philip's black, I'm white. All right, go ahead. When you hear somebody who's not part of the black community say they don't like the phrase Black Lives Matters because they feel like it's exclusionary to the value of other lives that aren't black, how does that make you feel as a black male? Well,
as a black male, my first reaction is like, it can be insensitive, and we're all guilty of this. It's like a big duh. I'm not saying that, you know, white lives don't matter, Asian lives, Mexican lives don't matter. However, I am bringing attention to, the disproportional effect of, or in treatment of, the black community in our policing and, traffic stop police interactions and in the criminal justice system. That's what I'm thinking about, how it plays out. And also economically, in some ways. That's what I'm really bringing attention to. It has nothing to do with just saying, it's like saying, in me, when I say Black Lives Matter, it's like saying the sky is blue and the grass is green.
When I think about the statement that Black Lives Matter, I'm no longer triggered. Okay, and I'll tell you why. The reason why is because through my own personal research, right, and I think everybody, if you care about this subject, then you probably need to get online and decide what sources of information you're going to trust, and you need to do your own research. And through my own personal research, and some of that had to do with just personal conversations that I've had with people that are from other races, I've come to the conclusion that it is certainly a different experience when you have interactions with law enforcement when you're a minority than it is when, I do it, right? What do you think as the cause for that fear associated with interacting with police?
It's just a thing. I mean, it has to do with years and years of mistreatment through police interaction. It's the reason why. And I had to talk. I had to talk to my parents. So like, hey, this is how you should act if you get pulled over. This is the things that you should do and these are the things that you not do. You need to come home alive. So we need to make sure that you're doing A, B, and C to make sure that you come home alive, kind of deal. Or that you don't go to jail or that you don't end up in any trouble.
I've heard multiple black males tell me that they think that police officers are eager to find an opportunity to use force against them. Do you feel like that's something that is a widely held belief in the black community? That police officers want to hurt them, they're looking for an excuse?
No, I'm gonna have to say I disagree with that. As far as the majority goes, if you want to rephrase the question, say that there's a lot of, I'm just gonna put it like this: the black male cognitive thinking is like this, especially amongst men. They're not thinking anything positive. Most of us are not thinking anything positive on the police stop or pullover. It's always kind of got a negative connotation to it. There are reasons for that. I believe the media has a lot, just as much as, to blame for that. But then again, I also think history has just as much as blame for that. There's been so many times that we've just been done wrong to make us not want to think right, and I got family members. I've got myself with testimonies here and there, and so
you hear those stories passed around among your circle of influence, and those people will tell you negative interactions that they've had with law enforcement and so on and so forth.
And and what's sad is it makes you forget all the positive ones. I'm somebody with a big heart. I'm like at the same time, like I've had a lot of very, very positive. I've had not a lot, but I've had some that were very memorable pullovers that went way better than I expected them to go. But at the same time, I'm always thinking negatively. I'm always nervous. My anxiety is out of the roof. I'm shaking. Just a little bit got the jitters. Like if I just jumped 10 cups of coffee with double shot espresso, I'm on level 10 every time, but I'm trying my best to be calm because I don't have any, good expectations of it, So I just don't.
So one of the things that I was exposed to, and I still get exposed to it in social media today. There was a video that I saw years and years ago, and it was a video of a black female state trooper pulling over a much larger black male. And he had warrants, and I believe he was running drugs, if I remember the story correctly. He gets out of the car. She indicates she's going to search him. He knows that he is going to get busted and go back to prison for multiple felonies, and it's going to be a long prison sentence. And his daughter gets out of the car, and he proceeds to literally pound this woman's face in. She almost died. And so I've seen that video. I've seen the video where the police officer is being polite and laxed. I believe this was a white male suspect, being polite and laxed, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. The guy grabs his gun and shoots him and leaves him in the ditch. I've seen the video where the police officer has an assailant take his taser. He does not use his firearm to disable the person who has his taser, which is what everybody wants the police officer to do. They say, hey, tasers are not deadly, so you shouldn't return deadly force because the taser's not deadly. The police officer gets tased, is knocked out, the guy takes his gun, kills him, kills his partner, right? I can't remember if he killed the tased guy, but I know he killed the guy's partner. And so I've seen those videos. Is social media showing those to me through some political motivation? Do people in the black community know that that's what police officers are trying to prevent in routine traffic stops when they seem to be acting like they're assholes?
Easily, I gotta say, those are... One thing I hate to do is I hate to downplay somebody else because lives were lost. But I hate to say it, but those are very rare cases. I mean, that happens, but it's not happening on a proportional rate to where there's an abuse of power. Rather than, I believe there's if you were to compare it, I think there's a higher abuse of power than there are people who are just criminal jackasses.
Okay.
Or asshats, per se. I do believe it happens a lot, but in just staying in the box of, black and police interactions alone, blacks and police interaction alone, most blacks are scared. We most of the time, I would even make the bet that we take off running. Most of the time we're finna boogie, take off, and we're off. Most of us take off running, but for all those situations where somebody has gotten beat up or anything, or where blacks fight, when a black man fights back, I think that's rare. It happens, but it's rare. Most of the time we're scared. We do stuff that's gonna possibly, that communicates for the cops to shoot us. There's a lot of times where it's just complete ignorance. Ignorance meaning not knowing. There's been things that we just did not know that has gotten a shot.
Right.
So
here's my concern.
Yeah.
My concern is, we're about to get into the meat of the matter, is that everybody decides where they're going to get their information from, right? And I've personally come to the conclusion that most sources of information have some secondary motivation besides telling the truth. I no longer trust the media to have journalistic integrity, right?
Right.
They're trying to play to an audience so that they can get views, so that they can get ad dollars. They are sometimes politically motivated. There's organizations like Black Lives Matter that I agree with you has basically been taken over by the Democratic Party as an arm of the Democratic Party to raise funds for political campaigns. And so, there's things like that. But one of the things that scares me is there's that whole concept that the police officer getting into a physical combat situation is rare, and that they don't necessarily need to be on guard for it because it's so rare that they are their life is put in jeopardy on surprise, right? And that on the flip side, a black person is justified in their fear of interacting with law enforcement when they're acting right, because it is common for a police officer to violate your human rights and potentially use deadly force against you when it wasn't justified is just not borne out by the facts. It's just not true. If you talk to any police officer, I will assure you that he has gotten into far more physical altercations on surprise when on routine police matters than he has shot an unarmed person. And the reality is that you're actually, as a black male in the United States, I ran the numbers on this, you are more likely to be struck by lightning twice as a black male in the United States than to be killed when unarmed in an interaction with a law enforcement officer. You're far more likely to be struck by lightning twice, right? But the media doesn't tell you that, right? The media makes it sound like if you get pulled over by a police officer, be careful, man, because he woke up this morning, he was looking to kill, right?
But yeah, that's where the line is drawn. You're right with that statement, but lightning striking has no morality. Mm-hmm. But a human being does, and whoever's behind that badge has morality. It has a morality standpoint. So it's still a human being killing another human being. So that's where the pass is drawn. I mean, you could draw up that conclusion saying you more likely to be struck by lightning, and it is factual. I'll go ahead and just agree because I trust you. I know you forever. You don't come with no facts. You come with facts. But at the same time, it's not a human being. You know, it has something to do with where you're at. It's just by chance, and
no, I get what you're saying.
You're saying that it's more so by chance. No, well, a lot of times it has to do with the situation because, like, they're making there's a line somewhere in the middle where somebody's making a conscious decision to take a life, whether it was upon their life or not, or which I think a lot of times it's on fear. I think that a lot of policing, just as much black officers to other black people. I think black people are just as afraid as other black people as other white people are afraid of black people. You know, I just think that when you do things a certain way or they come upon a certain situation, you know, people are just scary, you know, they're jittery. And I think it has a lot to do with the outcome. It causes us to make a lot of irrational decisions. I would
agree with that.
Yeah.
So that actually is part of why I'm so afraid for America. Yeah. Right? Is because people are deciding what source they're going to rely. They're going to rely on this information from this source, and they stay focused on that. And that source may be politically motivated. They may be financially motivated. They may have blinders on. They may have all of one type of person that, is responsible for bringing all this information together. And so there's a groupthink issue. There could be a lot of things. I try to listen to all different sides and talk to all different people and be open-minded and try to understand things. And one thing, while it is immoral that a police officer shoot an unarmed black person, right? One of the problems that I've had with the movement, even before it was labeled as the Black Lives Matter movement, is that often there would be all of this uproar when me as an individual that understands the other side for what it's like law enforcement interacting, right? Because they all watch the training videos. They see every single video where there's a routine traffic stop and all of a sudden the guy grabs the taser and tases him and kills his partner. They've all watched those videos in training, right? We have to understand they have that information in their head. They're being trained on how to behave in such a way to prevent that from happening with 100% success rate so that no police officers die senselessly, right? They've all gone through that training. And then you have a media outlet, or maybe it's a Facebook group or whatever, that's feeding information into a community, and they're over exaggerating what the actual risk is, okay? And they're making it sound like, hey, you need to be afraid in every law enforcement interaction. And it's like, you're more likely to get struck by lightning out of the bright blue sky than you are to be shot by a police officer. But they're making it sound like you should be afraid all the time. Here's the problem with that. Behaving in a scared manner when interacting with law enforcement is one of the things that they're trained to pay attention to, that they may actually be in danger. Because they're taught, from what I've been told from law enforcement officers, and I've only been able to get one to come on this program, because they all signed this thing that says they're not going to talk about this stuff, which is the main problem in my opinion, right? And it's like, if we could get the word out and everybody could understand what the law enforcement officer's expectation is, right? What is his training telling him to do? What things do you do that are triggering for that individual to go, hey, I'm in danger. I need to start thinking about using force. I need to ratchet up the aggression. I need to take full control over this situation. Because that's what happens when I've seen law enforcement interactions go sideways, is the individual is offended at the interaction. And so they come at the police officer with something that they think they're standing up for themselves, but they may or may not know that what they just said or did, or their posture, or their body language, or something about what they did was, he was trained, this is a warning sign. Or she was trained, this is a warning sign. You better take full control right now, or you're gonna be the next police training video, okay? And when you and I originally talked about doing this, before I ever started my podcast, what I said is I think the most effective thing would be if the law enforcement community would reach out to leaders in the Black community and ask them, what are you teaching your kids about us? Like, what is the perception? What could we do differently? And vice versa, if the law enforcement community would reach out to the public and say, hey, when you put your hand in your pocket, we're trained to get ready to shoot you. Right?
Instantly.
If you look past us over our shoulder, we're trained that you're about to look for an escape route. And we're trained that if you're looking for an escape route, you may intend on doing us harm before you try to get away. Right? And so if you're a individual in just the regular community and you're being trained by the media, be scared to death when you interact with a law enforcement officer, because he's looking to kill you. And that fear causes you to do those things that trigger him to ratchet it up and all that stuff. Now we've got this recipe for disaster, where you're going to have escalated situations that were never going to be escalated if everybody just understood each other, right?
Right.
And that's what I had hoped that my podcast would be able to do. But I'm so afraid to talk about the subject as a white male.
Because of all this. There's so much painted, and you know, I'll go ahead and say it, against, for especially white males. I mean, y'all got it a little hard right now. You know, it's about time, but shit. It's about time, but I mean, y'all do have it hard right now.
I forget what comedian it is, but if he makes a joke, he was like, if you could travel back in time as a white male, you can go to any time, and it's just going to be freaking awesome. He said, "I ain't going to the future, okay?
2020,
because at some point in the future, we're going to have to. There's going to be hell to pay. They're going to get us all back." Right? He's like, but I travel in the past. I just don't want to go to the future. So there's a new phenomenon out there, and it's, we're going to call it wokeness.
Oh.
Okay? So for those of you at home, if you don't know what being woke is basically being progressive, where you have embraced the change, and you want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, right? And so if you go, I went to a Black Lives Matter protest in Prosper, Texas, where I live, which is like the lily whitest place, right? Like, I'd be honest, right? It's like there's not a lot of minorities here.
Welcome, white.
And so, right, the deal. So I go and I'm driving, and there's like 2 black people there, maybe 2 brown people, and like 50 white people, right? And I'm like, okay. So one of the things I wanted to ask, and then those people will sometimes, they'll become offended for you, right?
Lord.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you hear those stories about, you know, Starbucks and whatever, and then there's some woman in line behind, and she's like, how dare you? And she loses it, right? And you're not losing it, but she's losing it for you. As a black male, how do you feel about triggered white people, like, taking up the banner and fighting for you? Does it make you feel supported, or does it make you feel used?
Well, be honest with you, if it's a white woman, that's okay. But if it's a white man, that's like 10 times the more kudos. I mean, it's like more supportive, like, because to me, it validates.
Okay.
It validates me.
Philip and I both grew up in church. You've been around like somebody that's like, hey, brother, how you doing, brother? Let me pray for you, right? And then he prays for you and he's like, dear Lord Jesus from up on high. And he's like making a big spectacle of it and all that stuff. Whenever somebody does that, all I can think is, this person is not praying for me.
Yeah, exactly.
He's praying for him.
Praying to be seen.
He's praying to be seen. He wants to be seen by me. He wants to be seen by the other people. He wants to be seen by God up above, right? But his heart is not for me, right? And then I've had somebody that was not religious at all say like, man, I'll be thinking about you. And that meant everything to me because I knew that that was from their heart. They really cared about me and my plight and what I was dealing with. You know what I mean? And that's how I feel about the woke movement. It's actually become like this weird way for mostly white women to co-opt the struggle of the black community and get attention for their white selves. And I'm like, this is disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you really care? Or do you know that this is a hot button issue and you can get out here and say all this stuff and you might, go viral on social media for being so woke? And I'm curious whether or not there's anything in the black community like, oh God, here we go. There's another Karen throwing a fit on our behalf, making us look stupid.
Exactly. I mean, when I see the videos, there's some that I'm absolutely flattered by. And then there's a majority of them I'm like, yeah, you're doing this for the views, or you're doing this like the person's praying out loud.
There are all of these statistics out there. And this is the one thing that I've been afraid to say publicly.
Go for it.
All right. So when you look at the statistics, they go, black people represent 12 to 14% of the U.S. population, yet they represent, 50% of, the prison population of violent crime convictions or whatever, right? Some number, something like that. 70%. So it's up there, right? Yeah. And then they go, so that's not right. Well, as an accountant, that's not a fair statistic. Because if you want to evaluate whether or not the system has a bias, you can't compare the general population to the number of people that are convicted, right? You have to compare the number of people who are committing the crime versus the number of people that get convicted, right? And there are a lot of statistics that show, for various reasons, and I'm not trying to say something negative about the African American community. There's a link between violent crime and crime in general and poverty. And and we're going to talk more about this, because of historical financial bias in the system against black people have been financially disadvantaged over the years and are more likely to live in densely populated, high percentage of African Americans in that community. And you have high crime rates, you have high murder rates, you have high everything in there. And so I don't like the characterization in the media and the wholesale acceptance in the black community that the system itself is racist simply because of the number of black people there are in the United States versus the number of black people that are being convicted of crimes and going to jail. Because I think that perpetuates this myth that you can do nothing and you can receive a punishment that's severe that you didn't earn, right? Then, and if y'all don't know this about me, I only listen to rap music. Okay? Philip can confirm.
It's true.
It's true. And
it's facts. I mean,
then I'm listening to rap music, and all of the things that get you put in prison and get you put on death row are all being glorified and taught in rap music to be like completely accept. In fact, if you are not down with these things, then you may not be part of the black community, right? You have to be prepared to kill somebody for stepping on your new Jordans. And if not, then you're a bitch and you're not real. You're not real. You're not keeping it 100, right? And so it's like, how can you hold both of these views, that the system itself has a bias against you, and yet you're being fed a steady diet inside your community to accept that not only is it okay for you to engage in these behaviors that are likely to land you in jail, but if you don't, you're not an acceptable member of society, and not see a connection between those two things.
Well, to go with from the jump, it's like whatever you teach a dog to do from start to finish is what it's gonna know how to do. We were bred in hate.
Okay.
From the jump. From the time we were brought here on ships, from the time, and through slavery throughout, then they let us out, and then they put a bunch of laws to suppress us from being citizens while we were quote unquote supposed to be citizens. There's been so much just hate just going on. Eventually, I would go to say that's going to reflect through our music and through the things that we are and through our nature. Our aggressive mentality in itself have to do with all the aggression that we're saying. I think there's a whole lot of lack of love that's been shown to the Black community under the hands of white men. Mm-hmm. Presently, no, that is not my reality. I've been showing a lot of love from you. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of love from a lot of people, and there's been some people that's older than me been showing a lot of love. But is that my reality? No. But I'm just talking about historically. Right. And what's gotten us to.
And that's passed down through the generations.
And it's passed down through generations. And then you want to wonder why we are. If you heard the expression that you've created a monster, there you go.
But isn't that prejudice?
It is prejudice, but it doesn't make it less factual. I mean, it's just like saying, it's like you throw these certain ingredients, you do this algorithm, you do this math, and you're going to get this. I just believe that in itself, from the jump, there's a lot of itemizations that could have happened differently, things that we could have done differently after slavery was abolished, after the Emancipation Proclamation. There's so many things that we could have done differently as a nation. That could have given us a different result than what we're dealing with right now in 2020. And
I agree with that.
There were so many mistakes that were made. There were so many things that were mishandled by white America and by the ruling majority that were at the powers be at time. And now you have this abomination that we're dealing with is simply because of the neglect. And the things that be going. For one, just the enablement of, racial behavior, racism. If we had federally disbanded and dealt with the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, just as soon as they came in as to be an entity, especially after, especially after they had freed the slaves, then it had been differently. But when you just allowed them to stay around to be a religious organization, if you want to call it religious, and guess what? What it's got you? Y'all enabling KKK has got y'all many problems. That's why you got Muslims, you got Al-Qaeda, you got all these other type of terrorist organization wants to solve your heads because you want to deal with this one that was an at-home terrorist. I mean, a lot of these other problems would not exist if you dealt with the first problem.
I don't disagree with you, except for on one point. This is America. And if a bunch of bigoted, toothless jackwagons want to get together and wear their mama sheets and talk about how superior they are to Black people, unfortunately, that's their American right. Where America screwed up is they didn't prosecute their crimes, right? Because, and you're not gonna like this, but according to your logic, America should shut down the Black Lives Matter movement because they are putting together rallies that are resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage to private and public property. And they are technically a terrorist organization. Okay?
I definitely agree.
Okay, but
it would never be a thing though. If there would be no such thing as Black Lives Matter or the Panthers if the Klan didn't exist.
And I don't 100% disagree with that. I think that what America's job is to make it so that individuals don't want to be involved in something like that, right?
Okay.
Because it's not America's job to say it's illegal to be involved in something like this. We're going to put you in jail if you do this thing that we don't want you to do, right? Because in America, we're supposed to have freedom to make our own choices. And then we should have to deal with the consequences of whatever those choices are, right? That's the American way, in my opinion. That's what I think being American is, right? That you have the right to do the most or the least with your life that you want, and that nobody owes you anything except for opportunity. If someone's stopping opportunity for you, then that person needs to be stopped, because that's not American.
Amen.
Everybody should have an equal right to go out and pursue life, liberty, and happiness, right? And if some toothless jackwagon wants to, think that happiness is marching around a burning cross with his mama's, linens on, then okay. But I'm not sure who's going to hire you, to go out and, change the world and provide a good life for your family if that's how you're behaving. And by the way, the moment that you put a burning cross in somebody's private property, we're going to put you in jail for that, right? But
even 50 years ago, it wasn't like that.
I know, but I'm just saying, and that's where America screwed up.
Exactly.
And America is now dealing with the consequences of having turned a blind eye to criminal behavior that was racially motivated, right?
Okay.
Sorry
for cutting you off.
No, I'm not. I don't feel cut off. But I'm saying you are absolutely correct. I don't think that America should have somehow tried to stop the Ku Klux Klan. I think they should have done what America does and evenly enforce the laws across the board, which they haven't always done. It irritates the crap out of me that Democrats are trying to take credit for being the advocates for Black America.
Which are not. I'll say that for
which they're not.
They're not. I'll say that for the record.
The first Democratic senator that was Black was in 1978. That was the year I was born. All the way up until the late 70s, Democrats were still trying to oppress Black people. And now all of a sudden they want to step up and act like they're the big progressive woke advocates. And oh, by the way, in the last 40 years, what have you done for Black society? The only thing that's happened in densely populated Black areas in inner cities is it's been gentrified, and the Black people have been driven out by increases in rent and displaced. That's the only thing that's happened for Black society in the last 40 years. And so if Democrats are so, caring and they want to do so much to help with the Black community, right? And just for the record, I'm kind of a Democrat when it comes to social issues, and I'm a Republican when it comes to financial issues, okay? Yeah. I'm pro-gay marriage, I'm pro-amnesty, I'm almost pro socialized medicine, just simply because there's such a disparity in care from one person to the next. And if we all had bad coverage, at least we all had the same coverage, I like equality. And so, I'm a weirdo. I don't fit into a category very well. But when it comes to Black society, I get irritated with the Democratic Party acting like they're the only ones that have been looking out for Black people. I also hate it when Republicans come up and go, well, we're the ones that freed the slaves. We're the ones that fought against Jim Crow laws. We're the ones that did that. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're also the ones that decided that you were going to give Black people a vote because you thought that they would vote for you and they'd keep you in power. Mm-hmm. You didn't treat them like humans.
You did it for political motivation.
You did it for political gain, right?
Yeah, political motivation. Gain,
and there's plenty of blame to be spread around in this thing. And the Ku Klux Klan played a large role. But one thing that we can learn from what America did with the Klan is to be very honest with you. And when, Colin Kaepernick started kneeling at football games and all that stuff, I had to talk with you, I don't know how many times before I even had a base level of understanding about what was going on. Because I was just so offended at what I perceived as disrespect to the American flag and the people that have died for that freedom. And I finally I feel like I
you did
understand, right? And it's associated with what you said about the Klan. We have a problem in America because history is written by the winners, okay? And white people have been winning in America since its inception.
Y'all winning. Y'all got the big W.
Got the big W. And unfortunately, we haven't always handled that win the best way, right? And in times past, we had the Ku Klux Klan. There's probably a lot of white people that are like, oh man, those guys are assholes, right? Probably didn't agree with what they were doing. But they also didn't band together and do anything to stop the illegal behavior. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They turned a blind eye to it because, well, they're one of us. We don't like them, but they're one of us.
Kind of deal.
Right? Now we got the same thing going on in law enforcement and in the black community. Because what happens to somebody in the black community that reports a crime?
You're a snitch.
You're a snitch, right? Because you don't tell on your own. What happens to a police officer that tells on another police officer for violating a black man's rights?
Yeah, you're a snitch.
You're a snitch, right? So now all of a sudden we got this weird thing where we got
a lot of gang mentalities.
A lot of gang mentalities going on in the police force. And if you don't know this, white people, black people have a reference point for understanding gang mentality because a lot of them have grown up in communities where they knew people who had a loyalty, either just to the black community as a whole or to some sort of a black organization that they were involved in. And that loyalty trumped all else. It trumped everyone else's human rights.
Right.
Right? Like if you're a member of this gang and there's another human being that's a member of another gang, his human rights don't matter anymore. Your obligation to your organization matters. Right? And so if you grow up in that community and you're used to seeing that mentality, and then you come across law enforcement officers and you know that some of them are doing wrong and the ones that think that it's wrong are doing nothing about it, now you're just perceived as a rival gang. But here's the difference. In the black community, if somebody is from a rival organization from you and they commit a crime, there's a chance that there's going to be repercussions for that.
Not a chance.
There are no repercussions for law enforcement officers. Not none, but there's very few repercussions for law enforcement officers when they violate someone's human rights. Because unfortunately, I feel like that the blue code, right, effectively makes law enforcement a gang. And I don't believe that things can get better in America between the black community and the law enforcement community until the law enforcement community drops the blue code. And says, we're for the law, we're not for our group.
Exactly. That's been some. I agree wholeheartedly with that. It's a lot of that. The blue code is a thing. It's a thing. It needs to be dealt away with just as much, but.
And it's no different than what America did with the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Right? Because the Klan would break the law and they go, well.
But they're the standard for law, so that's why there's so much, leeway. Like, that's why you really can't call, if you're supposed to be the person that's supposed to be standing for rights and all that stuff, and not rights, but, righteousness and what's just, you convicting him for a lot of wrongdoings does not reflect right on anybody that wears a badge. So that's why I believe there's so much jumps to actually defend or to justify anything that somebody that wore a badge did, or the blue people, or the blue, or cops, just in general. It's because y'all the ones supposed to uphold the law and supposed to hold just and righteous treatment, So that's the biggest thing is like, but when you're talking about gang mentality and you talk about, gangs and stuff, it's not so much as that. Good or bad, it's more so what's in, what's the best for the, the gang, Bloods, Crips, whatever gang you want to put out there. There's no morality standpoint. It's just basically what progresses the, the gang. But when you're talking about cops, it's more so of the justification of what's right and wrong. And if you're spending your whole time, if you're spending too much time justifying what a partner in arms did as wrong, more so than what was right, and having to fight against that, then it just looks suspect, know. And that's why
it perpetuates the problem.
It perpetuates the problem because now they want to do. That's why you have so many cops getting off with, vacation leave and all that type of stuff, paid leave and all that stuff, like,
Well, and the reality is, and this is there's plenty of blame to go
because
around.
because of the blue code, though.
Because of the blue code. There's plenty of blame to go around on all sides, right? The black community says we're upset with law enforcement because law enforcement officers are able to violate our human rights, and they do it at a much higher rate than white community understands, right?
That's true.
That is true. And I'm, as a white person who has a number of black friends, I don't want to say a lot because I don't want to overstate it, but I have a number of black friends.
He does. Don't let him trick y'all. He got a lot of
as a white
friends.
person that's talked with a lot of people about this, I don't have any black friends or acquaintances who have not had their human rights violated by a law enforcement officer. Zero. Okay? They tell me stories, my mind is blown. All right? Stuff that I've never had to, well, not never. There was one time where I had my rights violated. I actually do want to tell that story. Yeah. And so you've got that, right? And the black community is saying, if law enforcement would do their job and enforce the laws, right, and not turn a blind eye to wrong that's being done just because they're part of the same group, it would fix a lot of the problems.
Right.
But on the flip side, you've got the black community that won't report crimes. They won't testify when they know information that could help solve a crime. A lot of black media, like music and things like that, glorifies breaking the law, killing people, things like that. And then you've got like what's supposed to be a peaceful protest turning into looting and rioting. And now I'm seeing all of these woke white people get on the news and go, who says a protest has to be peaceful? And it's like, the fucking Constitution says it. You have the right to peaceably assemble. It doesn't say you have the right to burn buildings and steal all the valuable goods inside before you light it on fire, right? And so I feel like both sides are being a little bit hypocritical, and I get that it's now the black community is in a position where for 250 plus years they've been dealing with this same systematic overlooking of the rules that are supposed to protect them, the same systematic politicians coming in and trying to harness the power of the black vote, but not ever truly engaging in helping the community. The same systematic things going on and on and on. And now I'm afraid that I see too many of the people who could be bringing change turning a blind eye to the same sorts of problems that have gotten them in the situation now because it's inside their community and they're overlooking it. How do you feel when I say that?
It's a nail round the head type of situation. But there's always room for itemization, like you talked about, to be specific about, you talk about the reason why they want to commit the crimes because of music and the looting and the rioting and stuff of that sort. There's a lot of itemization in that. I mean, there's if you looked at a lot of the stuff that has to do with looting and rioting, there have been people that were without. There have been too many people that were without black skin that was doing just as much looting and rioting.
Oh, I'll admit, most of the rioting is not black people.
Yeah,
Most of it.
Yeah, and doing all the looting. But
it's opportunists that are showing up and blah blah blah. Right.
Yeah, it has nobody to do with the cause, but it has more so to do with if our voice has not been heard, you have to ask, have we tried these things in these ways for peace? Have we tried peaceful? Yeah, we tried it since way back in the Martin Luther King era. We tried peaceful ways to let you know that this is a problem. Kaepernick tried through a peaceful protest through kneeling. A lot of y'all didn't agree with that, but oh well. It still was peaceful. That's one thing that you can't argue. Regardless whether you reacted peacefully or not, it was still a peaceful way to do things. That's a fact. It didn't cause anybody no harm. Nobody was hurt. Rather than your own emotions or your thoughts towards the action. However, there was a lot of peaceful things that was done. And then we've tried peace again and again and again. And then now you're seeing all this stuff with all this rage, and then you're seeing people tearing stuff down. You're seeing a lot of violence committed. You're seeing actually now more so a lot of black people. You're seeing some black people fighting back, coming into poll. And that's not the answer. For one, let me make this clear. I'm not validating or saying that it's okay for us, to beat up law enforcement or anything like that. I'm not condoning that. But however, you are seeing it more so because of all the buildup. You're seeing that more often now. You're seeing people just, becoming inherently more violent. And it has everything to do with what's just been shown. Has everything to do with what's being continued. It's like the same energy being kept. People keeping the same energy, and it's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, it does not make me feel good when you say when you said what you said. But however, if you want to itemize and say, I can only say this is why. However, I can't come up with too many solutions because, right now, I hope I'm not on the side of the underdog. But for so many years, I've been on the side of the underdog for so long.
All right, I'm gonna say something that's kind of controversial.
Go for it. That's why we're here.
Right. The American way is about equal opportunity for all Americans. Okay. And I will admit that historically there have not been equal opportunity. Okay. But I feel like now it may not be 100% equal, but there's a whole lot less systemic racism in our financial system than there used to be. Okay. So if you are a black-owned business, you can actually charge more money for your services in a government contract and win the bid than you would be able to charge if you were a white-owned business, because you get priority access as a black business owner in government contracts. There's special laws on the books that prevent banking institutions from discriminating against you based on color. And there's actually audits that go on where they are checking to make sure that the minorities that applied that were denied, that there was a financial reason for it, and that there's not systemic racism in the system, right? And you and I had this conversation.
The economic
oppression. And somebody that wants to deny that there was economic oppression in the past, fuck off. You're stupid. Okay, There was economic oppression in the past. My fear is that the media and the Democrats stand to gain something by convincing Black America that they should not try because there's still so much oppression that there's no chance that they could ever move forward. And we just keep perpetuating this myth that there's no opportunity, and so no one tries. Not no one, but you know what I'm saying.
I know
as a whole,
and
then there's this whole thing that in the black community. You ever heard the story about the crabs? You put the crabs in the bucket,
crabs and bird,
and one of the crabs almost climbs out, and the other crab grabs him and pulls him back down. There's this whole thing in the black community that when somebody starts to come up, they're an Uncle Tom. Right? They're forgetting their roots. They're not, blah, blah, blah. Instead of there being a wholesale, encouragement and saying, yeah, you do you, keep going, pave the way, reinvest in the community. Let's do this, right? And one of the things that you and I talked about recently, there's so many people trying to take advantage of this opportunity. There was a small local government, was it in Georgia, Athens? I can't remember where it was.
What are you talking about?
Where they reparations.
Are you talking about Tulsa?
Yeah. No.
No, not that.
No. The thing that we messaged back and forth about. There was some local city government that passed a resolution.
Virginia. I think it was in Virginia.
And it started with an A. I can't remember. And they approved reparations, right? And then I read it, and all it was an economic impact zone, right? So If you don't know, for a very long time, the government has been providing tax financial incentives for individuals and businesses to invest in zones that were economically depressed. And like it or not, want to admit it or not, most of the economically depressed zones that are in the inner cities are highly populated by minorities. Okay? So they'll give tax breaks to businesses for investing in these areas, to start a new plant in that area, to create employment opportunities there, and so on and so forth. And basically what they were doing was saying, we're going to identify some economic impact zones, and we're going to invest our government dollars in these areas instead of others. And then they called it reparations.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I'm like, no, we've been doing this for a very long time. And to characterize it as reparations is like some sort of a power grab, because what you're trying to do is trick the uninformed black community into thinking that you gave them this thing that they've been told that they were entitled to forever, and you did nothing of the sort. None of those individuals are going to be given cash as payment for slavery, right? And then if you look historically, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but there have been lots of different races that have been enslaved throughout human history, including white people being enslaved by the Bards. The Egyptians enslaved the Jews for hundreds of years. And if you look at the total number of people that were enslaved and the total time that they were enslaved, the whites' enslavement of the blacks in the United States was nowhere near the top end of the injustice of slavery in human history, right? And it's like, well, if everybody's been enslaved at some point and taken advantage and been dealt with, economic oppression, how do we make that right besides just go, hey, let's focus on the now, right? And here's the thing about me. I'm against reparations. It doesn't make any sense. You're asking for people who didn't commit the crime to give up part of their income, to give money to somebody who didn't earn it, who also did not receive the punishment of the crime. It just doesn't make any sense to me. That having been said, I want to create a world where it doesn't matter what color your skin is, you have the same opportunity to go out there and achieve your dreams and pursue life, liberty, and happiness as any other person. I want law enforcement to apply all laws evenly, regardless of your economic situation, regardless of what color your skin is, religion, sexual orientation. I don't care what category you're in. I want the laws applied evenly, okay? And somehow I'm afraid to say those things because when I say I don't believe in reparations, there's people that all of a sudden want to kill me.
And that's wrong. Y'all should not want to kill him. That's not a good idea.
So if you could wave a magic wand.
Go ahead, my man.
How would you change things? What are some things you'd want to change?
The things that I would want to change are things that takes time to make. It's like a recipe, like even like you want to talk about the dish you made earlier. Certain things take time, to make, especially if you want the correct desired effect. There is no snap finger way to because it's just not going to go that way. And not everybody's going to start believing, but some things that we can start implementing is like some things you've talked about, once overt racism is found in certain cases, that you'll be penalized. To be honest with you, harshly, you'll be penalized harshly when you reflect, or what something that you did reflects that. Regardless of we have to start penalizing, we have to start demonizing the things that we've been enabling for so long, as a society and as a culture.
I want that too. Yeah. Here's what I've been thinking, right? If you're a white person out there and you don't have black friends, stop being an asshole and get some black friends.
Oh my Lord, amen.
Yeah,
feel the Lord all in it.
Yeah, and if you're a black person, you don't have any white friends, stop being an asshole and get some white friends.
I feel the Lord all in that too.
and then once you're friends with somebody, I want you to open your minds, and I want you to ask them. Now, I will caution you, do not answer a question that you are not asked in this environment.
Oh, my Lord, don't.
because that can cause some controversy, and he and I are very close, and we have gotten sideways a couple times when we talked about these things. Our relationship's strong enough to endure it, but if you're talking with somebody about these things, ask questions, seek to understand, right? Black community as a whole, I want you to understand that America has an obligation to you to provide you with every opportunity that it has ever provided to anyone else, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, so on and so forth, right? And there is a movement out there to try to convince you that you are not in control of your future and that you are so disenfranchised that there's no reason for you to even try. And most of the individuals that are preaching this want you to vote the way they tell you to vote. They want to control the black vote as a block, right? They say things like, if you don't vote for me, you're not really black, okay? And that's not fair, because no one would have ever said to the white populace of the United States, if you don't vote for me, then you're not really white. Because people assume that the white populace are thinking on their own and they're going to come to their own conclusion. But those people are assuming that black people are not thinking for their own and that they are going to vote as a block, and they try to emotionally manipulate you to do so. Media, stop lying to black people about what the actual risks are. Stop making everyone feel like they're going to get murdered because they got pulled over for speeding. Law enforcement, you got to get rid of the blue code. There should be only one code you follow, and it's the laws that you were sworn to uphold.
That part.
That's the only code. There is no other code. If there's a listen, law enforcement, black people, if you don't know, law enforcement is one of the worst professions that you can get into. They have higher suicide rates than almost any other profession. They have higher divorce rates than almost any other profession. They live a sad, lonely life, and the only people that understand the pain that they go through are their fellow officers, and that's why they act as a block, because they have been forced to do so through suffering, just like the black community has for the last 250 years. And so if there can be any compassion that's had, understand that that's what's going on in law enforcement. Doesn't make it right. Law enforcement has to get rid of the blue code, and you need to equally enforce the law. We probably need to get rid of anything that's associated with racial profiling, even though there are statistics that show that it can be effective at preventing crime, because it is also 100% effective at creating separation between the black community and the law enforcement community, which leads to senseless deaths. So, if the law enforcement community could start to educate the public about what their training is, what things do individuals do that are warning signs to law enforcement officers that they need to ratchet up what it is that they're doing, that they need to become more forceful, that they need to use force, that they need to use deadly force. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a conversation with somebody from the Black Lives Matter side of the equation, white or black, that said, well, why didn't he shoot him in the leg? Jesus Christ. Like, I know why you didn't shoot him in the leg. Trying to shoot someone in the leg as a law enforcement officer is actually a crime, because you're using deadly force, but you're admitting that it wasn't necessary, right? But the public doesn't know that. So I think that the police unions should stop paying publicists to go out and say stupid crap every time a police officer kills someone, and they haven't even had a chance to figure out whether or not the guy was in the wrong, and they immediately start defending it, and redirect that money into some sort of a, public ad campaign that educates the public about what law enforcement officers are and are not allowed to do in certain situations, so that people can make the decision. Hey, if I try to take the police officer's taser, am I going to be shot, or are we just going to fight it out? Right? People need to know those things so that they can make an informed decision. Educate the public about your training. Get rid of all of these rules where they're going to lose their job if they tell anybody what their training was. Because I have asked at least 15 law enforcement officers to come onto my podcast, and none of them will, because they don't want to lose their jobs because they signed that stupid social media clause. Mm-hmm. And all that does is create a complete separation between the community that you're supposed to be policing, right, and their understanding of what your job is. And that's why we keep having all of these conflicts, situations escalating that never needed to escalate, because there's a complete lack of understanding on either side. And so if you're in the black community, I want you to know that you are, regardless of what you've been told by the media or somebody who wanted to control your vote, just as capable as any other person in the United States of taking advantage of the opportunity of being in this great country. I will admit we're no longer the greatest country in the world. Pains me to say that.
Pains.
But there are still a line of people who are trying to illegally enter this country because of the tremendous opportunity that they know that is here. And if you look at the success rates of legal immigrants entering this country versus the success rate of the average African American that's born in this country, the immigrant success rate is a lot higher. Mm. And they are arguably just as discriminated against. And they are coming here to take advantage of the system that's been set up. And they do face some obstacles that they wouldn't have faced if they weren't immigrants. And they do face some obstacles that they wouldn't have faced if they weren't brown. But somehow they're finding a way to overcome it. And every black person that's in this country, I believe that you can overcome it too. And if there's one thing about me, is that, and I believe that this is the American way, I personally am prepared to die for your right to pursue that. Okay? So whether or not I fully understand your plight, because I know that I cannot, and whether or not I fully understand the situation, which I probably do not, and whether or not I've taken a position that you don't 100% agree with, which I probably have, and I may very well be wrong about that, just know that if you're here and you're an American, I believe in your right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And I believe that every branch of the government is obligated to create an environment where that's possible and stop anything that gets in the way of that. That's what I believe as an American.
For white America, and I'm addressing y'all first, because right now y'all are the majority. Mm-hmm. Stop being uncomfortable with racists talking about on either side. If anything, like this person has done over here, open up more venues to talk about those things, regardless of what opinions being shared. However, still talk about it. Let that person say their opinion. You say your opinion. You say their opinion. You say your opinion. It doesn't matter who has what to say. Just respect the opinion and keep it moving. At the end of the day, if you know y'all still love each other and y'all still friends, keep it moving. Black America. And I'm gonna say this on very thin ice. Don't try to find a devil under every rock, or a white devil under every rock, to be more specific. Don't get me wrong. There's been a lot of systemic and systematic things that's been going on that you can blame, white America on, and blase and quote unquote. But however, as far as things going today and their ways, I believe that we have progressed to get us out of that hole. However, there are some things, of course, with police interaction and things of that sort, and in economic ways that I believe that we have been suppressed, or you could believe we've been suppressed. But that's not the focus. But however, all of them trying to say that everything that you run across, oh, the white man did this, white man, I mean, let's kill all that. I mean, I'm a person who have, who has blacks on his side who are economically superior than a lot of the white folks that I know. Mm-hmm. I can honestly say that. They're even in my family. It's not an excuse. So as far as I want to say is that all we need to do is find understanding amongst one another. And as far as the blue code or the people who are in the blue or behind the badge, I want to just revert everything that this man had already said. Nothing else. I have no add-ins or no takeaways from that. So rewind the video and go apart where he addressed the police officers.
Amen.
Real talk.
And because this podcast is about feeling connected and knowing that you're part of a community that cares about you, I sign off every time with the same sign off. Mm-hmm. This is always an homage to my brother who took his own life, because I know how lonely he felt when he decided to make that decision. And I don't want anyone to ever feel that lonely again. And I know I don't have the power to take that away, but I do have to do everything that I can do. And so I just want you to know that if you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And I'll see you next time, Bourbon Real Talk. Cheers.
Cheers. Love you.
Love you too.